Let's get into our first discussion now. Following moves by the federal authorities to recover 368 grazing sites in 25 states, the September 1 deadline set by southern governors to begin the anti-grazing law in their states is just hours away. Now, in May, the 17 southern governors appealed to all states in the region to ensure that the anti-open grazing law is put in place. They recommended that the federal government support states that are willing to develop alternative and modern livestock management systems. Bayelsa, Rivers, Oyo, Ekiti, and Abia states have already given legal backing to this decision, and some other states are still in various stages of complying. How will all of this pan out when enforcement begins? These are some of the questions that we are going to ask. But certainly we have in the studio to discuss this Professor of Strategy and Development, Professor Anthony Killer, is here to help us make sense of all of this. Thank you very much for joining us on the program this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Now, the issue of open grazing in Nigeria in recent times has become a little more controversial when it comes to the approach to it and the understanding of it. The president, from the reports that we got, is disposed to, rejuvenating some of the old grazing routes and grazing sites. But governors are saying we are in the 21st century where we can't live the way we lived in 1950s and 60s and all of that. But what do you think is making this open grazing thing so controversial right now?
Well, I think there's issues that are gray sometimes. This is a clear issue of white and black, and there's no other way to say it. It must be said clearly that the president is wrong in his approach.
Wow.
His view is analog, and his mindset on this specific issue is not a productive
One
one.
would see it as just issues of perspectives.
Well, you see, we say that not all perspectives are equal perspectives. Some perspectives are blatantly wrong. This is an example of that. The idea of open grazing in 2021 is something that does not resonate with common sense, economic sense, and security need. It has no place at all. It has been demonstrated time and time that the regions of the world that are profiting from animal rearing, that are producing animals in tons in large quantities and making profit, are not doing open grazing. Open grazing is what nature gives you. But civilization, science, and knowledge tells us that the way is ranching. Because that way you're able to control them. It's better for the environment. It's more profitable for the people as well. That is the objective economic sense. In the Nigerian case, there is also a situation where open grazing is linked with insecurity. It's linked with trespassing of property. It's linked with scarcity of land and water. It's linked with so many things that makes total case against it. I think holding it is just a kind of traditional, at best, traditional position, at best, inability to be dynamic on more than an issue. And to this point, the governors who are against it are very right, and therein goes the politics. It's not perspective. What we are dealing with is a matter of federalism here. And it must be said that it is true that all the 17 governors of the southern state have taken a position against open grazing. But even in the north, there are governors who are saying they're not open grazing and they want to do ranching. Sokoto State comes to my mind, but I think also the governor of Katsina State. There are more than one governor.
They've raised their voices on this, and even the government of Benue State has even gone ahead to put the laws, the anti-grazing
law in place.
Laws.
So I think those at the federal government are acting more central than government, and they're wrong. You see, if they were arrogating themselves power that they shouldn't have in a federal system, and that goes to the issue of federalism here, to do the right thing, they might even get sympathy vote. But in this case, they're arrogating them power that they don't have to themselves, power that they do not have, should not have, to do the wrong thing. So it's a lose-lose situation for everybody.
The southern governors coming together in unison.
Yes.
A lot of people see it as more of the issue of regional politics
Yes.
than the issue of agriculture or the issue of security.
Yes, that might be true. I mean, with politicians, everything is possible. But we as citizens, we should look at the issues that allow them. Let us assume, let's just make, a very sort of Machiavellian case. Let us assume that the governors are using this thing, they're exploiting it to do regional politics. Then take it away from them. You see, if there was no issue of security, they will not have any excuse to be doing this. So, as citizens, we should not follow the intent of politicians. We should focus on the issues they're bringing to the table. The issue they're bringing to the table is issue of insecurity and issue of federalism. And yes, they are using it because all of a sudden they went there to declare that they want the presidency as well. That is because they're politicians. They want power. They always want partisan thing. But we as citizens should not look at that. We should focus on the insecurity and the federalism they're talking about. And we should note those who are for modernization and those who are against it. And those who keep quiet. Because very soon in this country, we should soon be asking ourselves, where were you? What did you say when this issue was on the burner? And I think it's time for citizens to start taking note of such things.
I recall that growing up as a little boy, we used to have this cattle come around the farms in the villages, and in fact we long for them to come, because when they come, the Fulani herders that bring them will give fura nunu, and then everybody is happy, and then they even try to speak our languages and all of that. There was this harmony and togetherness and all of that, looking forward to that season where the cattle are going to come, and then we beg them for a cow. We just play around things like that. At what point did we get it wrong, where the sighting of cows has become something else altogether now?
Well, let me start by saying that it is possible that you grew up together with President Buhari, because that is that's the kind of memory the president and those people for open grazing, that is the memory they hold on to. It is good, it's nostalgic, and it's romantic. But the reality is that today, the situation is normal like that. Now, people see herdsmen and flee. And I want to say this, but because I have a ranch, I'm an herdsman, as it were, myself. So, but these days, people see herdsmen and they just flee. That is what is today. What is yesterday, beautiful, nostalgic, romantic, can be treasured in our films and our images and works of art. The duty of politics, policy, and governance is not to treasure a romantic past, but to deal with a gruesome present in view of a better future. That is where we are. So there's no point saying, oh, it used to be that way. Yes, it used to be that way, but it is no more that way. We can go and see why it's no more that way. If there are criminal intentions on it, they should be prosecuted. And you see, and again, it must be said, the federal government has very little moral ground. They lack the moral authority on this issue because they've not been able to do their job very well. They've not been able to investigate, arrest, prosecute, and get condemnation for attackers. They've not been able to deal with the issue of criminal headsmen. They've not been able to identify and tackle the link between headsmen and criminality. How would they
have done that, in your opinion?
Well, they've been proactive. Look, because of the infrastructure problem we've had a long time in this country, because we were dealing with light, bad roads, and bad schools, we've been lucky. We forgot that as a people, we seem not to remember that the first duty of governance is security and certainty. Security that you can live, love, learn, trade, and worship, and plan your life with no fear of interruption by forces that are not legitimate. Certainty that when something happens, the government will act and the law will be respected. Because of those other issues we've been dealing with, and because we've not had issue of security, we don't know that security is the first issue, before light. I have said elsewhere that there should be a moratorium on all government activities till we solve the problem of security. Because without the security, you can't even do anything. You know, I speak for my constituency. People cannot go to conferences and seminars in certain states because they're afraid. People are postponing marriages or shifting burial ceremonies because of fear of being attacked.
Or even translating events to virtual
thing where there is no, where they would have loved to see. You see, that is fear. That is the essence of terrorism. You say, what should the government be doing? One of the first things the government should have done is to declare terrorists those who terrorize us. It is not just a way of saying, yes, it is semantics, but there is semantic implication of calling certain kind of criminals terrorists. Because once you declare them terrorists, the approach of the state towards them will be different. It will mean that the state has understood that the country is at war. Who are we fighting? We're fighting kidnappers, we're fighting bandits, we're fighting terrorists, we're fighting all those who, through terror, are impeding us of conducting our life as planned. And I want to say these things because it sounds like a radical approach. It might be, it might not be. But the fact is, history has example of where that has happened. In a country like Italy, in the 80s and 90s, when they were plagued by issue of kidnapping, organized crime, they actually went out to do a law, I think it's called 348 bis in Italian criminal code, where they equiparated criminal association, kidnapping, and terrorists together, because that would allow the military police, the armed forces, and the security forces to treat them as enemies. And that mindset alone, you deploy a lot of things. I'll tell you another thing that the government should have done that has not done. So, if you look at the issue of kidnapping and the issue of headsmen, that is a new thing, following your romantic past that you share with the president. It wasn't like that before. Since it came, can somebody show me what measure our defense apparatus, whether it's the police, whether it's the security service, the secret service, whether it's the army, has deployed that is different from what they were doing before? I've not seen them buy bikes to go into the forest because kidnappers use bikes. I've not seen the police organize themselves with bikes to go and chase them. We've not seen any kind of patrol, any kind of unit to investigate that specialize in going against headsmen. They say they come from other parts of the country. They say they come from parts of the country. You see, we've not seen something, an ad hoc approach to say, given a new situation, here is a new solution. So we've not been proactive enough. And because of all that, the federal government has lost that moral authority to be able to dictate the tune on these issues. So the state are stepping in. The state are stepping in for true security because objectively, they are called the chief security officers of their state. So in the issue of security, you cannot blame them for stepping up. They're also stepping in because if they don't, people will start booing them on their streets. They need to translate, represent, and act on the feeling, voices, and malice of their people, which is not being allowed. If something happened to us in Lagos, to people in other parts of the federation, they can't boo the president. He's in Abuja. They can't boo the ministers. We see them once in a while. But the people who are in their state can be booed, stoned, and protested against regularly.
Being closest to the people.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the consequence of that proximity is that they have to lead, and that is what they are doing. So if they're taking advantage of a bad situation to then do regional policies, as you accuse them of doing, or as you report some allegations against them, those are just collateral effects of an objective issue.
Okay. Now, the September 1 was the deadline that the state governors in the South gave to themselves to come up with the open anti-grazing law across the states in the South. Just a few have had the laws already. Then a few others, the state assemblies have passed, but the governors have not assented. Then we have other few that nothing has even gone to the assembly at all, like Cross River State, Anambra State, you know, and so on. Why do you think they have this, you know, disparity after they met and in one accord?
And therein comes in the human factor. It's a matter of 3 C's: commitment, competence, and character of the individuals. It is my view that when the state government go together, accept something without protesting, because 17 of them were there. If you do not agree with it, if you do not think you can get it done in your state, you could have protested openly against that date. When normally sane people, normally considered sane people, who even occupy position of authority and influence in a society, go and represent their constituency, agree to something, then come back to not implement it, I think they should be called out. I think somebody should tell us that this man or woman who has represented this constituency and who is not capable of delivering is incompetent, is insincere, hasn't got the gravities to follow up his word. You see, these things might sound like harsh word, but we have too many trouble in this land to not be direct on our issues. Our language must be very clear. Our intent must be limpid for all to see. You cannot go and represent millions of people, agree to something, then not follow up. There was enough time to do it. And if there's any problem, it should have been raised. It is not possible that you go in the name of people to agree to something without thinking it through. The essence of governance is logic and certainty, I repeat. The certainty issue is very, very key, because we have to think of stakeholders, whether fellow governors, investors, citizens, or community people who are banking on what the governors have said. You can't just turn around and say, oh, I've not done it or it's not doable. That is what you do with little children. As a matter of fact, even little children have to submit their task, whether they're students or pupils. So to that extent, that is bad for the governors to do. It's a test. So we've seen the passion, we've seen their understanding, but then this is time to see their action. It is one thing to recognize what needs to be done. It is another thing to be able to do it. Then it's then another level to do it correctly.
What scenarios do you see playing forward after the September 1 deadline?
Well, I think what happens that we'll have states that, like with the COVID, we're going to have vaccinated and non-vaccinated states. Vaccinated states will be states that have passed legislation. The non-vaccinated ones will be the ones that have not. And it will also show the quality of governors they have, actually.
All right. Professor Anthony Killer, thank you so much for lending your voice on this. Thanks for your insight.
Having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.